Now, Far Cry 6 is the latest installment in the franchise, and I'm a huge fan of the series as a whole. Others say that the last good game was something like 5 or even 4, and they haven't made anything close to that since. And to me, it does seem like they kept on adding onto each game with every launch, and fast forward to modern day, and the actual core of the game is quite different. Therefore, some players just aren't a fan of these newer ones. So yeah, this definitely makes 6 the most diverse one of them all. The actual premise and the promotion surrounding the game was actually quite good, and a lot of people had high hopes. A huge tropical open world, guerrilla warfare, a huge variety of weapons and co-op, and the bit I probably most look forward to was Giancarlo Esposito as the villain. And that sounds amazing, all put together, but it didn't exactly hit the right spot for some players, and hopefully, as I look back in 2026, you can decide if it's more your thing. So the game takes place on the fictional island of Yara, which is pretty much Cuba. That's the main inspiration, and it's ruled by dictator Anton Castillo, who, as I mentioned, is played by none other than Giancarlo. The main protagonist of Danny gets dragged into this mission of basically overthrowing their goal. The setting is by far one of the game's biggest strengths to me, and that's why when I was looking at gameplay and trailers for the game a few years back, from like a visuals and look point of view, it seems crazy how anyone could see that and call it a bad game. The location of Yara looks great and still does now, as expected. I mean, the game came out in 2021, so 5 years old now, but by today's standards, those games still look amazing and hold up. You've got these really dense jungle areas as well as coastal towns, the usual military bases where you can raid, and I'll get onto that. Just so much colour everywhere, some really old vehicles as well of that setting. They definitely nailed the atmosphere, I'd say. So at first, I remember hearing a lot of mixed opinions. Some people just outright hated it, and I definitely thought it was a bit overhated when I did my review. I also went in with an open mind because of it. Now, it is a bit weird because it doesn't like reinvent the base Far Cry formula. If you've played the newer ones, like 5 for example, you realise what you're getting into, you know? So you've got the outposts, you've got the checkpoints, enemy camps, and just overall exploration and stealth missions, etc. That's all still here. But they definitely tried adding more on top of the usual gameplay structure this time. And sometimes, again, that can work well to offer something fresh, but can also push people away and people think they change stuff for no reason. And by far the biggest example is the Supremos. They made a huge difference. Basically, they're these backpacks that you basically let you go wild and give a ton of abilities like launching rockets into the sky, EMPs, or just going ham on a group of enemies. They're meant to be exaggerated and over the top and way less grounded compared to the older stuff. And for some people, that completely killed the vibe, and again, compared to the older games where they felt a bit more realistic. But it does make sense. I mean, it's the 6th entry in the series. They can't just keep doing the same gameplay style over and over and just change the location or the characters. I get why they experimented with it, and if not, then like I said, the game would just feel like the same thing. Some of the new additions I had a lot of fun with back when I played a few years ago, and I still do now. And in a way, it actually might be one of the most fun games in the series just from a pure gameplay perspective. Not necessarily the best overall game itself as a Far Cry entry, but maybe one of the most entertaining if you go in with an open mind. Like looking at moment to moment, it's quite chaotic. You could easily be, you know, stealthily taking down an outpost with suppressed guns and melee attacks, and then if all else fails, you can just rain these rockets down everywhere or use your amigo to help, and I'll get on to amigos. They're basically your own sidekick pet. The weapon customization also got expanded a lot compared to previous games, and this is one of the strongest parts for me. There's so many different attachments and ammo types, gadgets to experiment with and fit your playstyle. Now, the stealth mechanics are actually quite solid, and when done right, stealth can be fun, which I was glad at, because if you've seen my other Far Cry videos, you'll know that's something that I don't think they ever fully got right, especially later, and this one has amazing stealth. But there's just one gripe, and that's the enemy detection, and not so much them spotting you quite easily. That just depends on your difficulty, but for some reason the game has some really fast enemy respawns, sometimes straight away, and I know this was an issue back then when it came out, and it does look like they haven't nerfed it at all, and it's quite annoying because it rips away that stealth immersion entirely. It's not all the time it was a problem, but usually when raiding bases, a big part of the game, if there's like a sniper on the tower and you easily pick them off, and then they respawn and instantly spot you again and you had no idea they were back. Or even even just simply being overwhelmed by how many of them respawn if you move away. Like I said, not every single time, but definitely enough to still be a big issue for me, and other players have also complained. As far as weapon variety goes, the different ammo types of armor-piercing rounds, poison rounds, incendiary, I was always a fan of that, and it becomes more tactical when you have to switch sometimes depending on the enemy you're fighting. If you use the wrong ammo type, enemies can suddenly feel much more tanky, and again, some people might not like that. I just think it added a bit more strategy to it. The takedown animations are smoother, more brutal I would say, more varied as well. It's hard to remember smaller things like that in other titles to compare them to, but this one does seem fine. The gear system also ties into stealth quite good, with different clothing perks improving crouch speed or weapon damage, detection, etc. And yeah, definitely I tried my best to go stealthily, but as we know, it wasn't always the case. But that could also be due to the fact that I'm not the best at stealth. And other little additions are some of the gadgets which go alongside the Supremos, which are kind of crazy. As I said, EMP grenades, perception grenades to highlight enemies, weapons like throwing knives and sticky grenades, poison gadgets, turrets. There's just way more variety compared to other games I feel like, and it just adds to that fun. Vehicles even got changed slightly for the better. You can now call them in instead of having to travel somewhere. A simple change, but it does make traversing the map easier. Crouch sliding also helped with movement overall, that was a new feature. Now going back to the amigos, there's a few different ones, so some clearly more useful than others. Guapo is the crocodile and Chorizo is the dog, or Chorizo, I'm still not sure. Just them following you around was quite cool, and again more fun. They can do all sorts, like Guapo ripping apart enemies and helping with distractions, but I do prefer Chorizo. He can distract pinged enemies but also pings crafting materials. You can add certain perks like health regeneration simply by petting them, or gaining more money from looted bodies, etc. It's just a cool helping hand. Now story wise, Danny is probably one of the more likeable protagonists in the series. Nothing crazy in terms of like character development or anything, but after some Far Cry games having completely silent protagonists, I definitely prefer having an actual voiced character again. I played as female Danny because personally I think her voice acting fit the tone better, but the biggest part obviously was my man Anton Castillo, and of course Giancarlo gives a great performance. I mean, you can tell immediately, he just has this presence every time he's on screen and just gives it so much more. In terms of a villain, he's quite intimidating and clearly quite smart. The problem is though is that you just don't see him enough. Compared to villains like Vars or even Pagan Min, there's only a few moments where you directly interact with him, and a lot of his main moments are towards the end of the game. I guess they wanted something different and thought that he would become more menacing if he didn't interact as much. Like in other games, when you had those moments, it sort of made you think twice about the villain and think maybe they aren't entirely evil, whereas Anton doesn't really get that, so I can see why. But it is wild how much they underuse him considering how much they marketed him before the launch. What I actually found more interesting sometimes was Diego, his son, because unlike him, he actually isn't always sure, and that's probably because he's just a kid. You never fully know where his head is at or what kind of person he's eventually going to become, so it just brings that unpredictability. As far as side villains though, I mean most of them are pretty forgettable, and that's kind of where the game just feels strange. Some areas are massively improved from older games, while some are just weaker or take away stuff that was good. It's like they flipped the formula upside down. The gameplay for sure has more variety and more customization than ever. Some may not like that. The protagonist is stronger, but the villains outside Anton, they aren't as memorable, and himself doesn't get enough screen time. The world looks amazing, but from what I covered, the game can become repetitive, and the repetition is always going to be an issue depending on who you are. The people getting fatigue from the game, it does make a lot of sense. There's a lot to do, but not all of it feels worth it or adds much. If you try clearing everywhere on the map, you're definitely going to get burnt out. I honestly think the game is best played casually, just jumping in for a few hours and clearing out some outposts, do a bit of exploring, or mess around with the Supremos, and then come back again. But yeah, looking back in 2026, I do think the game was definitely overhated in some ways. The amount of people that say it's a bad game is crazy, because it definitely isn't, and I always stand by that. I know bugs were also an issue, and now have long been fixed and runs a lot smoother. I mean, if you already enjoyed the Far Cry formula, or open world Ubisoft games in general, then yeah, I think there's a good chance you will enjoy this. It's also a lot cheaper now, and always in some sort of sale. But if you're completely done with repetitive Far Cry style missions and just modern Ubisoft design, this isn't going to suddenly change your mind. It's still the most divisive game in the series, and it tried a bit too hard to evolve the formula, but then also somehow feeling very similar at the same time. And whether that works for you or not really depends on what you want from it, but personally, replaying it now, I still had fun like I did back then. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then let me know by tapping that like button down below, and if you enjoy single player and multiplayer games as well, then that's what this channel does focus on. I have many playlists on a selection of games, so you can subscribe to the channel if you'd like to. If you want to support me any further, you can become a member of the channel at either level 1 or 2 to gain access to various perks. Thank you all for the support, and for anyone that does drink G Fuel, you can use my code COWSY at checkout to get a discount on your order. That was Far Cry 6 in 2026, and bye bye.